Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Cathedral. The Sunshine Cathedral is a different kind of church where the past is past and the future has infinite possibilities. And with that, we invite you to come and worship with us here on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. Now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Our first reading today is from Lamentations. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. God's mercy never comes to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in God. The Lord is good to those who wait for God, to the soul that seeks God. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is from the Wisdom of Ernest Holmes. The will of God and the nature of God are identical, since God could have no will opposed to God's own nature. Hence, if God is wholeness, peace, and joy, then the divine will for all is wholeness, peace, and joy. The will of God is always toward the more abundant life. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
God is with you. And also with you. A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, Lord. A large crowd followed him and pressed in on Jesus. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. And she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately after the power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." This is the gospel, the good news.
I met a man in seminary who was 67 years old in his final year of the program. My first year, his third year, and he was 67. He'd always wanted to be a pastor, but he wound up in another career and just never found his way out of it. And so he spent his entire life thinking about what might have been and what could have been and still wishing that it had been. So finally, when he retired at 64 years old, he enrolled in seminary. He decided that he would do it anyway. So at 67, 3 years after he had enrolled in seminary, he was graduating and about to be ordained and had already been offered a parish, a small rural parish that could never afford a full-time pastor, but because of his retirement income, he could afford to take the part-time salary that they could offer, but he could also give them his full energy and attention. He could work for less because he had the other income and because he was just so thrilled to be doing what he'd always wanted to do anyway. So they got a lot of life experience and a lot of excitement for as much as they could afford. It was a win-win situation, really. He was able to finally follow his dream. What if he had given up on that dream at 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or even at 63? At 64, he began training for a career that was his lifelong wish, a wish that was finally fulfilled at the age of 67. Catherine Justin was a nurse who at the age of 42 started acting in community theater. 10 years later, at 52, she went pro as a street performer at Disney in Orlando. At 55, she moved to California and started acting in guest roles on television programs, and at 59, landed a role on a major television series, The West Wing, and then later was cast in Desperate Housewives. She recently passed away. What if she hadn't auditioned for that first play when she was 42? How different would her life have been? When I lived in New York, I did an internship at an off-Broadway theater downtown, and I also directed some shows uptown and was very involved in artist communities. And there was a seminary professor, she taught languages, ancient languages, who had always wanted to act, but had just never found the courage to do so. Well, I was directing a show uptown, and so I said, well, why don't you audition? And we actually bartered for it. I said, I promise you'll be cast. And in exchange, maybe you'll tutor me with my Greek. I struggled with Greek, languages. So she would tutor me, and I would sort of tutor her in this theatrical exchange. Well, she did audition and actually was very good, so I didn't mind casting her at all. And then she worked so hard, and she was brilliant. And she was about 60 at the time. And she brought her family, and they were so proud that she had finally, at 60, done something she'd wanted to do since she was a child. And she planned to do more of it after that, but she became ill and died. What if she had never done that one thing she'd always wanted to do? What if she had died without having been in that play? In 1987, comedy legend Joan Rivers was fired from her own talk show on the then new Fox television network, and her husband was fired as the show's producer. And 3 months later, overcome with depression, her husband committed suicide. From this time of tragedy, though, Joan rebuilt her career, and now at the age of 79 is still going strong. Ronald Reagan ran for president 3 times before he won his party's nomination, and then the White House. When he finally became president, he was 69. He became the leader of the free world at 69, and then at 73 was reelected. At age 44, activist and freedom fighter Nelson Mandela was imprisoned in South Africa, and he remained in prison for 27 years. 4 years after his release, at the age of 75, he became the first democratically elected president of South Africa, which under his leadership was also the first country to include equality for same-gender loving people in a national constitution. His body was incarcerated for almost 3 decades, but by some miracle, his spirit never was. And at 75, he started to lead the nation that for most of his life told him he was at best a second-class citizen. Grandma Moses started painting in her late 70s and lived to be 100. Trailblazing comic Phyllis Diller didn't retire until she was 90, and today at 94 still paints and gardens. George Burns, who worked in vaudeville, radio, television, and film, never retired. He worked until his death at the age of 100. And last week, Joaquin Arciago Guzman became a U.S. citizen at the age of 102. In 1928, at the age of 18, he left his home country to come, the Philippines, to come to the U.S. He came to California to harvest lettuce and cabbage for 40 cents an hour. 84 years later, he took the U.S. oath of allegiance. After giving the bulk of his life to this country, working here, living here, being part of this economy, he finally gets to claim citizenship in the country of his choice. As long as we are alive, we have purpose. Faithfully seeking that purpose can lead to amazing experiences, as these stories of these indefatigable figures have demonstrated. We don't have to agree with their politics or subscribe to their religion or share their philosophies or enjoy their art, but whether we do or not, we can and should admire the tenacity which let them say to themselves over and over again, I can do something more, maybe something new, but I'm not done yet. Chapters may be concluded, but the epilogue hasn't been written yet. I can't go back, but there's still something new and worthwhile to do. There may be nothing stronger than the human spirit willing to try one more time. And that's what we see in the gospel lesson today. The well-known woman with the issue of blood. Well, actually, maybe she's not so well-known. I mean, what's her name? The male storytellers didn't think that that bit of information was necessary, or perhaps later male editors redacted that information. But in any case, the woman in our story today is unnamed, unknown, almost invisible. She is portrayed in the story as sort of sneaking about and crawling around and being unseen, unnamed, unknown, unseen. That's the thing about oppression. It tries to erase our humanity. It tries to persuade the world that we don't exist, or that we shouldn't exist, or that we don't matter. To be named, or better, to claim our own name, is an empowering, life-giving act of justice and healing. To say, I am a woman, or I am a man, regardless of the genitalia I came here with, or I am queer, even though decades ago people tried to use that word to shame or control me. Once I claim it for myself, once I name what I am, then fear and shame disappear, and I roar with courage that I didn't even know was possible to have. To say, I am positive, or I am in recovery, or I am lesbian, or I am a heterosexual who loves my gay son, or my gay ex-husband, or my bisexual daughter, or my lesbian sister, or my gay best friend. To name ourselves in the human family and to take our place at the table of human dignity is powerful. And it is a power that systems of oppression would try to deny us. Let us never be the unnamed, unknown, and unseen. Well, this noble child of God in the gospel story deserves a name. So let's call her Batia. Batia is the Hebrew word meaning daughter of God, and Jesus calls her daughter. Maybe that really was her name. Maybe only Jesus bothered to learn and use her name. But for today, we'll know her as Batia. Now, I won't guess what Batia's medical condition is, though it is clearly of a gynecological nature. I won't take the time to elaborate on how ancient scriptures found blood to be particularly distasteful. Even the eating of rare meat was forbidden. So this woman whose bleeding is chronic makes her a social pariah. And I won't bother to explore in depth the misogyny, whether latent or overt, of later male Christian theologians who would come to tell this story as if a woman's blood rendered her unclean, but who would then insist that Jesus' blood, that is a man's blood, was somehow redemptive. That assault on feminine dignity should not go unchallenged, but we'll have to do more with that at a later date. What I will point out is that as our courageous friend Batia suffered from her condition for a dozen years, she never let it have the last word. She spent her last dime on medical treatments, and no one should ever have to spend their last dime just to stay alive. But she did everything she could. When one medical practitioner failed to help, she saw another and another, year after year. Bleeding could leave her anemic, it could leave her penniless, it could leave her almost friendless, but it could not rob her of her self-respect unless she allowed it to. And she wouldn't, not our Batia. She was, after all, a daughter of God. Now, I'm sure there were days that she was discouraged, but she wouldn't let herself stay in that place of despair. She affirmed one more time that possibilities existed, and she tried one more time to experience something better. Out of money, she hears that a new prophet who seems to be able to help people reclaim their lives is out there. And of course, she believes he wouldn't want to see her because she doesn't have any money left. She can't pay him. But maybe she can slip up behind him and just touch his garments. In antiquity, it was believed that people who possessed magical powers would infuse their garments and objects in their lives with some of their power, sort of like metaphysical sweat stains. Influenced by folk traditions of her time, Batia imagines, if I can just touch the robe, maybe enough of his special essence will flow into me and cure me. Of course, we are beyond such magical kind of thinking in the 21st century, yay! But in a day when medicine was very crude and very primitive, such things were the best hope one had. I don't believe Jesus' clothes were radioactive with special magic or metaphysical sweat stains. I don't even know if Jesus really noticed in a huge crowd that one person in particular had touched him. What I do know is, according to the storyteller's imagination, this woman didn't let discouraging diagnoses or prognoses and financial hardships and social prejudices keep her from trying one more thing one more time. She believed that she was worth the effort. Even if it never paid off, she was still worth the attempt. The real healing is to refuse to believe that we are no more than our circumstances. I want this condition to improve, but until it does, I will not be defined by it. Dr. King said, I may not get there with you, and yet he still fought for equality. Moses did not make it to the promised land, but he led all the way that he could until he died. People, the real miracle is to say, I believe I deserve the best. Even if I never get it, I believe I deserve it. And I won't settle for less, and I won't define myself by the conditions that seem to want to deny me the best. And that attitude is what led Batia to her healing breakthrough. And notice that Jesus didn't say to her, I heal you. And he didn't say to her, my magic clothes heal you. He didn't even say God is healing you. He said your faith, your belief in your own sacred value, your trust in the goodness of your life, your refusal to allow circumstances to define you has made you well. Be healed. Not I heal you. Just go and be healed. Just be all that you already are. Just be. Just keep believing in your goodness and live into that, and let the wholeness that the circumstances of life can't take from you, let that be what you focus on and experience in your life. Be healed. And we know that what we think habitually, we experience eventually. What we think habitually, we experience eventually. This woman, fictional or not, spent 12 years, and 12 seems to mean something in sacred literature. 12 apostles, 12 tribes, 12 elders. Jesus amazes the priest when he is 12 years old, 12 months in a year, 12 Olympian deities, and so on. 12 may represent strength or power or wisdom or hope or wholeness. It pops up a lot. But in any case, she spends 12 years saying to herself, maybe today I find what I'm looking for. And then she kept looking. And when year 9 rolled around, she kept looking. And when year 10 rolled around, she kept looking. She didn't give up. And even though it took longer than she would have wanted, because she believed in possibilities and never stopped seeking the opportunities, the day finally came when her consistent thinking and searching and trying paid off. And her attitude, her trust, her faith led to her healing. It took 12 years, but even after 12 years, it wasn't too late. Maybe it's almost never too late, as long as we keep trying and keep believing that we're worth the effort. And this is the good news. Amen. It's been one of those weeks with the visits and the phone calls and the emails just pouring in. One of those weeks where I've been very much aware that there is a lot of discouragement in the world, where people are struggling for self-esteem, struggling because their families have rejected them, even in the 21st century, just for being who they are, who they love. That people are struggling with their finances, they're struggling with their health, they're struggling with the unknown. And what almost always happens when I'm talking with them, I don't have an answer. I can't give everyone a job who needs a job. My clothes aren't magical. They can't cure anybody just by touching them. You know, I don't always have the answer, but what I discover when talking with people is that what the circumstances have done, or what they've allowed them to do, is to rob their hope and to rob their sense of their sacred value. And so we start with trying to get that back. We start by reminding ourselves, I deserve the effort. It may or may not pay off. We hope it does. And if we don't give up, it probably will. But the main point is, we deserve the effort. We deserve to keep going, even if it doesn't happen until we're 64 or 70. We deserve the effort that it takes to keep trying. Are you ready to believe that you're worth the effort? Are you ready to believe that no matter what's going on around you, you are a person of sacred value? Are you ready to tell yourself that your circumstances don't decide who you are? If you're ready for that, ministers are coming forward now to anoint us with oil. It is a simple reminder that right where we are, the divine presence is. It is a reminder of our sacred value and our enormous potential, where we can summon the trust and the goodness of life and the faith in our own goodness to allow that goodness to be made manifest in our experience of life. We're going to hear the Christ in us say to us today, your faith has made things better.
On the night you were betrayed, you took the bread. After giving thanks, you broke it and said, "This is my body, open to you. And as you eat this, remember me."
This is my body, open to you. And as you eat this, remember me. On the night you were betrayed, you held the cup. After giving thanks, you lifted it up. This is my life, poured out for you. And as you drink this, remember me.
This is my life, poured out for you.
And as you drink this, remember me.
Thank you for the wine and for the bread. We recall the life you lived and the truth that you spread.
Thank God our Maker, oh heavenly dove. In Christ we celebrate your wondrous love. Thank God our Maker, oh heavenly dove. In Christ we celebrate your wondrous love.
Here at the Sunshine Cathedral, we practice an open communion, and what that means is you don't have to be a member of this church or any church to receive the sacrament. Just as you are with whatever your beliefs or doubts may be, you are welcome to participate in this feast of unconditional love. My friends, these are the gifts of God for all the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Hello, I want to thank you for joining us for worship today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. Again, if you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, please stop by and worship with us on Sundays at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to find out more about the Sunshine Cathedral, about our resources, or about our books published by our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, or if you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, may God continue to richly bless you on your journey.